everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone 12 Pro has been out for a little over 6 months and seems to be one of Apple's best-selling phones, if not the best-selling. They don't really report the sales figures, but many people say the iPhone 12 and 12 Pro are having incredible sales, and I think that's due to its overall size, its newer design, and so I wanted to talk about how well it's held up over those past 6 months, what battery life is like, and just go over things like reception and more. And the first thing is its overall durability. Now, this iPhone 12 Pro has held up really well. It's got a stainless steel frame, as you may know, and if you don't have it in a case, it will pretty much scratch fairly easily, although I would say it scratches less easily than maybe last year's iPhone 11 Pro. So it's held up well, but this one has been kept in a case. And this is an iPhone leather case from Apple, and you'll see there's a couple indents there. It's meant to sort of wear and patina, but in general, it's held up well. But I wanted to show you an iPhone that's been used 100% of the time. Since I use this phone and a 12 Pro Max, I go back and forth. I wanted to show you a phone that's been used 100% of the time since it released. This is my wife's iPhone 12 Pro, and she generally changes the case based on season, and she takes really good care of this. In fact, she's had this phone just since the release day of the iPhone 12 Pro, and she switched from an iPhone 10. She's not someone that wants a new phone all the time, and so with this new design, she liked it, and it was 3 years later, so she thought she'd switch. And it's been in a case ever since, and generally she'll switch based on season. And so this is one of the newer spring cases, and it's protected the iPhone well. You'll see that this is the silver variant of the iPhone, and if we look around the outside edge, you might see there's a little bit of marking here where maybe some dust got in, but in general, it's held up well. Now, if you don't have the silver iPhone in a case, this will scratch pretty easily as it's polished stainless steel, and you could buff some of this out, but it's held up well even in the areas where it may not very well. So right around the lightning port, sometimes you'll get a bunch of scratches based on it being open a little bit, but thanks to the newer cases having a little bit better protection on the bottom, you can see that it's held up well thanks to that. So it's actually protected the speaker ports and everything much better than the open cases we had before. Now, as far as the display goes, the display's fine because it has a screen protector on it. Now, I have a screen protector on both of these iPhones, and if you've followed my videos for any amount of time, you'll know that I don't generally use screen protectors that much. But on certain phones, I will, and this one actually has a screen protector. You can see it's off-centered a little bit, so I may have to fix that later, but it doesn't have a single scratch on it thanks to that. Even around the Face ID sensors where it's exposed, there's no issues there. And based on experience with the iPhone 12 Pro Max without a screen protector, these displays hold up much better than their previous year's counterparts. So the iPhone 11 Pro, for example, scratched very easily compared to this one. And so that's why I put screen protectors on all of them, since I thought they'd scratch easier. But the 12 Pro Max has not really scratched that much, and these hold up well. So if you're not using a screen protector with it, they'll hold up better than before. But still, I normally advise most people to use one if they're very concerned about that. You can see this is my wife's aesthetic. She sort of has it matching the case, so that's how she uses it most of the time. So I left it how she leaves it, and we'll talk more about battery life in a little bit. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is its display. The iPhone 12 Pro display is one of the best displays out there. It's extremely color accurate, in fact, to the point where it might be a little bit too warm for some people. And if that's the case, I generally recommend people turn off True Tone, where it gives it a little bit more blue color or vibrant color instead of more of a yellow tone. So for some people, this is a problem, but they tend to be very accurate. They have great viewing angles, and they go super bright. So if you're in sunlight a lot, they'll go up to 800 nits with normal use at their fullest bright or highest brightness, compared to say an iPhone 12 that goes up to about 625 nits or so. So it will go a little bit brighter, and then up to 1200 nits at the highest range. So when you're watching HDR, for example. Now, these displays are controlled by PWM, which means they flicker the display faster or slower. With an OLED display, that's generally how they control brightness, and that can cause problems for some people in making them feel nauseated, giving headaches, or increased eye strain. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone. It's about 1 in 10, and in previous iPhones, I experienced that quite a bit. And with the iPhone 11, they seem to fix that, and it's much better with the iPhone 12 series. They're at such a high PWM rate that most people that had issues with them before won't have issues with them. As you can see in slow-mo at 240 frames per second, the screen is actually flashing on and off to control that brightness. It's a flicker screen. It's not flicker free like you may see in other places with monitors, for example. So it may bother your eyes, it may not, but if you're prone to that bothering you, these seem to be much better than the previous generation in my experience. So as someone who is bothered by this, these seem to be much better. Also, when we're talking about these displays, there's a concern of green tint. Now that has been fixed mostly with the recent updates of iOS 14.5, for example. Some people still have green tint around the outside edges, or other issues with the display, maybe on a black background where the display brightness is low. Sometimes people see it on higher brightnesses, but neither of these displays have that. So some people have it. Apple fixed it with the 11 Pro. They had the same problem last year. The 11 Pro and 11 Pro Max, they fixed last August with that problem. So they still could be working on this. Some people experience it. I haven't seen it on either of these iPhone 12 Pros, so it may not be a problem for everyone. Now, also, they do display 4K HDR, like I said. So if I go into YouTube and go to one of my videos, the 12 Pro Max 1 month later video, and we go to the display options here, you'll see under advanced, we have 2160p HDR. So 4K HDR, and these displays look incredible when watching HDR. They go super bright. In fact, this might be too bright to see on the display because the brightness is turned up a little bit, but if I turn it down, it may look closer to what it looks like if you don't have an HDR display. But if you do, it's closer to what your eye can see. So the background is really nice and bright. The blacks are very deep and black, and it just looks great overall. Also, along with that, this has great speakers, and they've held up pretty well. Let me go ahead and move the microphone, and then I'll hit play so you can hear. Work fine as well. And so, like I said, it's 4K HDR, and hopefully you're seeing the 4K resolution. It does take a little bit of time for YouTube to process that, but in general, the camera looks amazing, and it's recording from an iPhone 12 Pro. Now, this particular phone... Now, at the highest of volumes, the speakers are nice and loud, but they do get a little bit muffled at the very top of the volume range. So you might want to bring that down a little bit, but they sound great. In fact, they impress me from time to time with the amount of bass they have if you were listening to music, for example. I played a voice clip so you could hear the difference between the speakers here and me actually speaking into the same microphone. So hopefully that gives you an idea if you haven't heard them in person. Now, overall reception is quite good as well. So on my wife's iPhone 12 Pro Max, you'll see we have 3 bars of 5G, and I'm inside a building, and generally I'll get 2 to 3 bars in this building. Speeds have been decent depending where you live. So if we go over to speed test, we'll open that up and we'll just hit go, and we'll see what we get. Like I said, we're inside a building, so that can decrease the speeds, but I'm getting about 120 to 130 megabits per second with download speeds. That's pretty good considering I don't have millimeter wave where I live, and on 4G it's a little bit slower. Upload, I'm getting about 7 to 8 megabits per second. So just depending where you are, this can be great or not as great. 5G is fast for some people. Where I live, it tends to be very fast, but the fastest millimeter wave is not available where I live on the carrier I use. It's sparse enough that I would say if you're looking specifically for those super high speed millimeter wave speeds, if that's a concern for you, I would make sure that you have millimeter wave in the area you live, because where I live in the Charlotte area, there's not a whole lot of that for T-Mobile, for example, but for Verizon and AT&T, there could be if that's something that's important to you. I wouldn't run out and buy this for that specific thing, but reception overall has been great. In fact, my wife has never dropped a call on this. She's never complained about that, and she had with the iPhone 10. So this one seems to be much better as far as reception overall, and I can say the same about any of the iPhone 12 series I've used. Now that Apple's using Qualcomm modems, it seems to be much better. So along with the 5G, the antenna in general and the radio inside just seems to be much better. So better reception and less lost calls. And now iOS 14.5.1 is the latest version. It's on my wife's iPhone 12 Pro, and she generally uses things like music and the camera and basic use. You can see she has a fairly sparse layout on her phone, and she likes to keep it pretty minimal and then matching whatever aesthetic she has, so whether that be a case or whatever else. So it works pretty well for her. And before I made this video, I asked her, is there anything that stood out that you were having an issue with? And a couple versions ago, she had some issues, but now she said she hasn't had any problems problems. Now, that's not going to be the same for everyone. It depends if you're a power user or not. She is not a power user. She uses the iPhone and the iPad to play games and things like that. For someone like me that uses social media a lot, I really don't have too many issues, but I follow up on those with different videos, and quite a few of you have seen the issues I've had or that you have had. So in general, these tend to be pretty solid experiences, and the iPhone 12 Pro will get updates for at least 5 more years, usually based on what Apple has done. So maybe iOS 19 or longer than that if we're still on iOS 19 or they call it something else. Now, overall battery life depends on how you use your phone, of course, but let's take a look at it. And like I said, my wife's phone's been in use every single day since the release of iPhone 12 Pro. So battery life, we'll take a look at battery health in a moment, but over the last 10 days, this is the first time I'm looking at this. You can see, well, let's go back to yesterday, 2 hours and 34 minutes of screen on time, 3 minutes of screen off time, and about 40% usage. So that would give her 5 to 6 hours of screen on time. Now, this can vary from person to person. The day before, she had 3 hours and 31 minutes of screen on time and used 50% of her battery life. If you doubled that and she used another 50% of her battery, she would get about 7 hours of screen on time. So it really depends on how you're using it and what you're doing day to day. So depending on the day, it's going to vary greatly. But in general, 5 to 6 hours seems to be about right when I ask people with iPhone 12 Pro what their battery life is like. Now, as far as battery health, my wife has 100%, and this has been charged every single night wirelessly with a case on. That's how she charges it. If it needs to be charged throughout the day, she'll put it on a charger, whether that be Lightning or wireless. Now, she uses various chargers, whether that be an iPad charger, a 12-watt iPad charger, or every single night before going to bed, she'll put it on her nightstand where there's a Samsung 7.5-watt wireless charger. The charger can actually go faster, but based on the different standards and things, it's charging at 7.5. And then also in the car from time to time, wirelessly charging this most of the time, and it's held up well. She wirelessly charges it with a case on as well, so heat is not an issue for her. Our house is generally around 72 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's held up really well. It's charged every single night, so that's actually holding up quite well. And let me show you the battery cycles as well. And as you can see, here are the battery cycles. She's had 113 battery cycles, and what that means is draining the battery 100% and then recharging it 100%. So a full cycle could mean you drain it one day to 50%, charge it back up to 100. That would be half of a cycle. Then you do the same thing the next day. That would be one full cycle. So that's how many cycles she has on her battery. So it's held up well as far as that goes. Now, when it comes to the cameras, these cameras are definitely my favorite for recording video if you want to record HDR video, for example. They're phenomenal for that. The forward-facing camera, again, 4K, 60 frames per second. You can do HDR with it. It's an incredible device for that. So I wanted to show you some footage that you could use this for vlogging. And the forward-facing camera is good enough that you could use it every single day as your main camera for YouTube. This is the forward-facing camera in 4K 60, and I'm not using an external microphone, so it's blocking out background noise pretty well, and it does a great job of the shadows and highlights and things like that. In HDR, it's even better. But if you want better stabilization, you can switch to the rear camera. And with the rear-facing camera, it's much more stable. You don't get the shake that you do with the forward-facing camera, but you don't get the reach you would with maybe the ultra-wide camera. So you definitely could use that as well. Now with the ultra-wide camera, because it's ultra-wide, it seems stable as well. You get a little bit different audio from it, but you've got a nice wide angle where you can see everything in the background as well. Now for most situations, I'd probably just use the forward-facing camera. In 4K 60, it's good enough that you can use it as your main camera, your main YouTube camera, whether you vlog or record other video. The rear-facing camera looks great as long as you have the right lighting. So as long as you light it properly, this definitely could be the main YouTube camera. And I've compared this up to many more expensive cameras, and many people prefer the look of the iPhone camera, and that's compared to some very high-end Sony cameras. So it just depends who you are, but in general, I think most people will get a result they're happy with this. Photos are great as well. It generally gets it right, and most people will be very, very happy with this camera for at least another few years, unless there's some major changes. But night pictures, everything else seems to be great with this. Now, should you pick up an iPhone 12 Pro? Well, that really depends on your needs. If you have a phone that just doesn't work anymore and you can get a phenomenal deal on these, well, then definitely I would pick one up. I wouldn't hesitate. They'll get updates for years to come. However, we're only a few months away from the iPhone 13 at this point. In September, Apple should show us the iPhone 13, and if you have to have the latest and greatest, you may want to wait for that, where they're supposedly going to have even better cameras, as well as maybe better battery, and also a little bit better display if the rumors are true. So the display could have ProMotion, which is on the iPad, which means it would have a higher refresh rate of about 120 hertz, and it would just make it even more smooth. Or smoother, and when you're scrolling through different things, it's just really nice to use. You have to see it to appreciate it, but in general, if those things don't matter to you, then I would definitely go out and pick one of these up if they had a buy one, get one free sort of deal, or maybe a discount from your carrier. So it's definitely worth picking up. It's a great phone, and I highly recommend it to anyone looking for maybe something based on cameras that wants to record video, even make YouTube videos. I've recorded a lot of videos with these phones. So let me know what you think about them in the comments below. If you'd like to get the wallpaper on the iPhone 12 Pro, the blue iPhone 12 Pro, I'll link it in the description. The other one should be in your wallpapers that are included with the phone itself. So if you'd like to get that, though, let me know in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed already, though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.